Today on Reading with MiMi, we're going to do something new. I'm going to read the first chapter of the first book in the Nancy Drew Clue book, and then you can read the rest with your mom or dad. So make sure you have your book, and we'll get started. The first book is called The Pool Party Puzzler. Say that 3 times fast. Okay. Chapter 1. Thrones and Groans. I've heard of sweet 16 parties before, George Fayan said, but who ever heard of sweet half 16? Nancy Drew looked up from the goodie bag she was filling for Deidre Shannon's sweet half 16 party. 8 is half of 16, Nancy explained. So Deidre is turning 8, and she asked her parents to have a sweet half 16 party. And whatever Deidre wants, Bess Marvel said, dropping a fancy iced cookie in a bag, Deidre gets. It was summer vacation, and the theme of Deidre's party was Beach Party Blast. Nancy, Bess, and George had come extra early to help George's mom cater the party. Louise Phelan had catered lots of kids' birthday parties, but nothing as fancy as this. We're 8 years old and half 16 too, Nancy pointed out. And we have something just as awesome as this party. What? Bess asked. Our own detective club called the Clue Crew, Nancy answered with a smile. Nancy, Bess, and George high-fived. The 3 best friends loved solving mysteries more than anything. They even had their own detective headquarters in Nancy's room. And my dad just gave me this brand new notebook, Nancy said, pulling the notebook with the shiny red cover from her bag. He told me it would be a good place to write down suspects and clues for our cases. I'm going to call it the Clue Book. Nancy's father wasn't a detective, but he was a lawyer. To Nancy, that was the next best thing. But we've already written down all our suspects on your computer, Nancy, George pointed out. George loved electronic gadgets more than anything. That's true, Nancy nodded, but we can take the Clue Book with us wherever we go. It will make us better detectives. Okay, if we're such great detectives, George said, why are we all dressed up so goofy? Deidre asked everybody to wear sea costumes over our swimsuits, Nancy reminded her. I'm a seahorse, Bess is a sea fairy, and you're jellyfish, George groaned. The ribbon tentacles streamed from her hat, wiggling around her face. Don't remind me. So would you rather be Nancy or George or Bess? Think about it. Moving on. Nancy brushed aside her reddish blonde bangs to look for Deidre. She was probably getting ready for her grand entrance. Mrs. Fan said it would be at 1 o'clock sharp after the guests arrive. Great job, girls, Mrs. Fan said after all the goodie bags had been stuffed and placed on the table. Why don't you explore the yard before the others get here? Nancy smiled as she looked around the Shannon's backyard. It looked more like a beach than a yard. There was real white sand and beach umbrellas around the pool. On each of the party tables was a sandcastle centerpiece surrounded by shells and starfish. Inflated palm trees dotted the lawn. So did some of Deidre's birthday presents, like a shiny lavender electric scooter with matching helmet. This party is going to be amazing, George said. I bet every kid in River Heights is invited. Every kid but Shelby Metcalf, Nancy said. Deidre is still mad at Shelby for not trading lunches with her at school one day. What kind of lunch? Bea asked. Shelby had peanut butter and jelly, Nancy explained, and Deidre had a soggy spinach salad. I'd want to trade too. George suddenly stopped walking. Hey, check it out, she said, pointing to something in the distance. Nancy and Bess looked to see where George was pointing. A woman wearing a sun hat was busy snipping hedges behind the pool. The 3 hedges were shaped like sea creatures. Let's get a closer look, Nancy said excitedly. The girls hurried over to the woman. She was in the middle of trimming the claw on the hedge shaped like a crab. Hello, Bess said. Are you a gardener? I'm what they call a garden designer, the woman replied with a cheerful smile. My name is Taffy, and I create topiaries. She pointed at one of the leafy hedges. Topiaries, Nancy repeated. Topiaries by Taffy, Taffy said proudly. That's the name of my company. Did Dietra see these topiaries yet? George said. If she did, Bess said, I bet she loved them. But Taffy shook her head and sighed. Dietra wasn't happy with my topiary. She said she wanted one that looked like her. You mean she wanted a grassy statue of herself? George asked. Taffy nodded and said, Dietra said she's the queen of the sea and that her perfect party had to be perfect. That sounds like Dietra all right, Bess said. Oh well, Taffy said. She gave her topiary one final snap. I guess I'll have to surprise Queen Dietra later. Nancy wondered what the surprise would be. But before she got a chance to ask, Bess shook Nancy's arm. The other guests are here, Bess announced. Nancy turned to see the other kids dressed like sea creatures in Shannon's backyard. The most awesome party of the year was about to begin. After saying a quick goodbye to Taffy, the girls ran to join the others. Many were dancing, some were sipping smoothies. Nancy recognized Kendra Jackson, Macy Rubin, and Henderson Murphy from school. But there was one kid no one knew. Who's that kid? George asked. She nodded at the kid wearing the green sea monster costume. A mask and a headdress totally covered his or her face. Both hands were stuffed inside gloves with long webbed fingers. I know how we can find out, Nancy said with a smile. Let's go over and say hi. The girls walked over to the sea monster kid. Hi there, that's a nice costume, Bess said kindly, but aren't you hot in there? The kid shook his or her head and then walked away without saying a word. We still don't know who she is, Bess said. How do you know she's a she? Nancy asked. Her feet weren't covered, Bess said. Didn't you see her purple sandals and pink toenail polish? Totally girly girl. Like you, Bess, George teased. Only you would notice purple sandals and pink toenail polish. Nancy giggled. Bess and George were cousins, but totally different. Bess had blonde hair and blue eyes, and she loved clothes more than anything. George had dark eyes and curly hair, and she was fine with new clothes as long as there were enough pockets for her, electronic gadgets. I have an idea, Nancy suggested. Let's get some smoothies before the tropical ones are gone. Last one there is a rotten coconut, George declared. They were about to run to the party's special smoothie stand when a big voice boomed through the DJ speakers. Attention, kids! Let's give it up for everybody's favorite sweet half-16 birthday girl, Queen Dietra of the Sea. It's Dietra's grand entrance, Nancy said excitedly. She glanced at her watch. It was 1 o'clock, and right on schedule. The kids gathered on the patio to watch. A trumpet blared as 4 teenagers wearing huge fish headdresses marched around to the side of the house. In each of their hands was a pole, and resting upon the 4 poles was a giant half-shell throne. Nancy couldn't believe her eyes. Waving down from the elaborate shell was Dietra. The birthday girl was dressed in a Gency mermaid costume and a shell-covered crown. Awesome! Nancy exclaimed. The teens made a sharp turn, and the throne tipped. Dietra screamed as it swayed back and forth. Oh no! Nancy shouted as she covered her eyes. Queen Dietra is going to fall. And it looks like she does. That brings us to chapter 2. No, not cool in the pool. So I'm going to put a bookmark in there, and that's where you guys will need to start when you finish watching the video. I hope you enjoyed the first chapter of this new book, and that you and your sister will listen quietly while your mom or dad reads you more. Hope you enjoy it. Take care. Until we see you the next time.